Lyra's wrists ached where the metal cuffs dug into her skin. She had been dragged across the palace courtyard, her body tired and bruised, yet her mind was sharper than ever. The alien guards did not understand her calm. They thought fear would break her. They were wrong. The palace of the Emperor was enormous, taller than anything Lyra had ever seen. Golden towers pierced the sky, and the walls shimmered with strange energy that pulsed like a heartbeat. Aliens of all shapes and colors moved about, each one more intimidating than the last. They were taller, stronger, and far more alien than humans, with their extra limbs and sharp claws. Yet Lyra walked with her head held high. She would not let them see her fear. She had been captured on a distant colony planet during a raid. The aliens had called her primitive, laughed at her because she was human. But she knew something they did not. Humans were clever. Humans adapted. And humans survived. Lyra had survived worse. The guards shoved her into a large chamber, cold and silent. The walls were carved with alien symbols that seemed to glow faintly. She sensed power here, power that radiated from someone important. The Emperor. She had heard of him, a ruler feared across countless star systems, a being who crushed rebellions before they even began. And now, she was his slave. The door hissed open, and a tall figure entered. Lyra froze. The alien was immense, with silver skin that reflected the chamber's light. His eyes were sharp and intelligent, more curious than angry. He wore a crown of crystals that glowed faintly, showing he was the Emperor. "You are human," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "They told me humans were weak, fragile, but you look strong enough to fight." Lyra bowed her head slightly. "I am what I must be, my Emperor." Her voice was calm, steady. She would not betray the fear that could become a weapon. The Emperor studied her. "You are clever. I see it in your eyes. Most slaves are simple. They obey or die. You are neither." A spark of hope flared in Lyra's chest. He noticed something in her. That could be dangerous, yes, but also powerful. If she played her cards right, she could survive, and perhaps more. She was led through endless hallways filled with statues of alien heroes. Each statue looked stronger and more fearsome than the last. Yet Lyra noticed cracks, small signs of decay in the Empire's grandeur. She took mental notes. Every empire had weaknesses. Every ruler had enemies. She would find them. The chamber, where she was to live, was small but clean. No windows, but soft light glowed from the walls. Lyra studied it carefully. There were no secret exits, but the guards underestimated humans' patience and creativity. She would watch, listen, and learn. Her first night alone, Lyra recalled stories from her people about surviving impossible situations. Humans survived. Deserts, oceans, wars, and starvation. Humans adapted. Humans survived where others failed. She had survived being captured. She would survive here, and she would find a way to change her fate. The next morning, Lyra was taken to serve in the Emperor's court. She was introduced as a slave to attend his daily rituals. Around her, nobles whispered and stared. They were tall, elegant, and cruel-looking. Some had dozens of arms. Others had wings or sharp tails. They wore elaborate robes and spoke in a language she barely understood. Yet she listened, memorizing everything. Every insult, every secret, every plan. During the Emperor's council, a group of nobles argued about a recent rebellion. They spoke harshly of the humans who had fought back on a mining planet. "Primitive creatures," one said, flicking his clawed hand. "They are unworthy of attention. Let them rot in cages." Lyra's lips curved slightly. That was their mistake. They underestimated her. They thought humans were simple, weak, and obedient. But humans had something aliens often lacked: unpredictability, creativity, and courage. One noble leaned too close, sneering at her. "Do you even understand what we are saying, human?" he hissed. Lyra straightened her posture. "I understand, more than you think," she replied quietly, her voice steady. Every eye turned to her. The court murmured. The Emperor's gaze sharpened. He raised a hand, silencing the room. "She speaks," he said, his tone unreadable. "Interesting." From that moment, Lyra knew things would change. She had captured the Emperor's attention, not with force, but with intelligence. That was her first victory. A small one, but significant. Humans were underestimated, and that mistake could become her greatest advantage. In the days that followed, Lyra learned the court's routines, listened to secret conversations, and observed the Emperor's behavior. She noticed how the nobles feared him, yet some tried to manipulate him for power. She also noticed the Emperor was curious, even fascinated, by her. Perhaps he saw something in humans that others did not. One evening, during a lavish dinner, Lyra subtly corrected a noble's miscalculation about trade routes. The room went silent. The noble's face turned red with anger, but the Emperor leaned forward, eyes sparkling. "She thinks differently," he said softly, more to himself than anyone else. "That could be useful." Lyra smiled faintly. It was a dangerous game, yes, but she knew humans had survived worse. They had survived empires, wars, and impossible odds, and she would survive this one. Not just survive, she would rise. As the palace lights dimmed that night, Lyra lay on the small cot in her chamber. She closed her eyes and planned. Step by step, she would learn the Empire's secrets. Step by step, she would earn the Emperor's trust. Step by step, she would turn her chains into power. Humans were not slaves. Humans were clever, adaptable, and strong. And this human, Lyra, was about to. Lyra awoke to the soft hum of the palace. The walls glowed faintly, casting long shadows across her small chamber. Another day in the Emperor's court awaited her, and she felt no fear, only purpose. She had survived the first days, earned the Emperor's curiosity, and learned more about the Empire than anyone expected from a simple human slave. The palace corridors were alive with activity. Nobles hurried past, their multiple limbs moving in precise patterns, their eyes flicking suspiciously at her. Some whispered about her, calling her bold, daring, and dangerous. Lyra smiled faintly to herself. That was exactly what she wanted. Fear mixed with respect. That was power. She was summoned to the Emperor's council again. Today, he did not speak much at first. Instead, he observed her. Lyra noticed his attention. It was sharper than before, more thoughtful. The other nobles shifted uncomfortably. They had always been the smartest in the room. Now they were uneasy. A discussion had begun about trade negotiations with a neighboring system. The nobles argued in rapid, complicated patterns, using numbers and predictions that seemed impossible to follow. Lyra listened carefully, following logic where the aliens often overlooked it. Humans thought differently, and sometimes that difference was the advantage. When one noble miscalculated the route of supply ships, Lyra quietly pointed out a flaw. The room went silent. The noble's face twisted with anger. "You dare interrupt me, human?" he snarled, claws clicking on the table. The Emperor raised a hand. "She has a point," he said calmly, and the court froze. Lyra's heart beat quickly, but she did not flinch. This was exactly what she needed. Influence, carefully placed. She had shown that even a human could see what these aliens overlooked. Later, Lyra returned to her chamber. She thought about her position. She was still a slave, still bound by chains and orders. But she had information, influence, and attention. That was the first step toward real power. She could survive by staying clever and invisible enough to avoid the nobles' plotting, yet visible enough to gain the emperor's trust. The palace was full of secrets, and humans had a talent for noticing details that others missed. Lyra discovered hidden corridors, quiet rooms where nobles met in secret, and subtle signs of betrayal. Every day she catalogued their weaknesses. Patience was her weapon. Observation was her shield. Humans could wait longer than most aliens could understand. One evening, while serving the emperor his dinner, Lyra noticed a subtle signal between two nobles. A slight nod, a barely perceptible shift of weight. They were planning something. Most humans might have ignored it. Most aliens might have thought it unimportant. But Lyra's mind connected the dots. There would be a plot soon, she realized. She had to warn the emperor without revealing her knowledge too openly. She waited for the right moment. As one noble stepped forward to accuse another of treachery, Lyra quietly suggested an alternative explanation, carefully phrased to sound as though she only observed common court behavior. The emperor paused, considering her words. Slowly, he nodded. The nobles who planned the betrayal froze, unsure. Their secret had been noticed, yet they could not prove it. The emperor's gaze lingered on Lyra. "You see more than I expected," he said softly. "This human, she may be useful." Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. Useful was the first step. Trusted would come next. And with trust came influence. Influence could change the empire. That night, Lyra studied maps and records she had secretly memorized over the past days. She noticed patterns, inconsistencies, and opportunities. She saw which nobles were loyal to the emperor, which were greedy, and which were plotting against him. She created a mental web of the empire's power. One by one, she would navigate it. Days passed, and the emperor began to seek her opinions in private. Small questions at first. "What do you think of this trade? Do you notice anything unusual?" But Lyra answered carefully, always clever, always calm. She never revealed too much. She always left him wanting more. Meanwhile, some nobles grew suspicious. They whispered to each other, plotting to remove her. One night, they tried to trick her with false information, hoping she would reveal herself as inexperienced. Lyra smiled inwardly. She already suspected their trick. She fed them small lies in return, carefully shaping their perception, making them doubt each other. Her patience and cleverness were paying off. The emperor began to value her advice, not just her obedience. He did not know it yet, but Lyra was slowly teaching him something new. Humans were unpredictable. Humans were capable of reasoning beyond what alien logic could imagine. Humans had courage, patience, and creativity, all in one body. The palace itself seemed alive with challenges. Secret passages, hidden rooms, encrypted communications, everything was a puzzle. Lyra thrived on puzzles. She learned the guard schedules, discovered which doors were weak, and noted the movements of the palace's spies. Every detail she learned gave her more control over her survival and her influence. One evening, the emperor summoned her personally. The private chamber was warm and dimly lit, decorated with statues and crystals that pulsed softly. He watched her carefully, as if he were studying a complicated equation. "You are clever," he said simply. "I see potential in you that others cannot. Many would fear the court, the nobles, or me. But you adapt. You survive. That is rare." Lyra bowed slightly, keeping her voice calm. "Survival is only the first step, my emperor. Understanding is the second. I wish to understand, to help where I can." The emperor nodded, intrigued. "Then perhaps you will learn more than others. Perhaps you will even teach me." Lyra allowed herself a small smile. That was the moment she had been waiting for. Her chains were still there, but her influence had begun. Humans were not weak. Humans were clever, adaptable, and patient. And one human in particular was about to change the way the Emperor and his court saw the galaxy. She left the chamber that night with a plan forming in her mind. Patience, observation, and intelligence would guide her. Every small action, every clever word, every careful decision would bring her closer to survival, and perhaps more. One day, she realized, she would no longer be a slave. One day, the Emperor himself might see humans as equals, and one day, she might even shape the future of the Empire itself. The palace had grown quieter in the early hours of the morning, yet Lyra's mind was alive with plans. She moved through the halls with purpose, observing, listening, and learning. Every whisper among the nobles, every slight glance, every hesitation, carried information. The more she watched, the more she understood the Empire. Its strength was not in its soldiers or its wealth. It was in the fear and control that kept everyone in line. The Emperor had begun to trust her in ways the nobles could not imagine. He asked for her opinion on minor matters at first, and then on more important issues. Lyra offered her thoughts carefully, showing insight that no alien advisor had ever considered. Her words were always calm, precise, and thoughtful. Slowly, the Emperor began to see humans not as weak, primitive creatures, but as clever and resourceful. One afternoon, a message arrived from a distant colony under threat of rebellion. The nobles argued immediately, suggesting harsh punishments, mass arrests, and shows of power. But Lyra spoke quietly, yet firmly. They will resist more if you strike blindly. Understand their needs. Show strength in strategy, not only force. The room went silent. The Emperor leaned back, considering her words. Interesting, he murmured. A human can advise on strategy? Perhaps you think differently because you see the smaller threads in a larger pattern. Lyra nodded. Humans often notice what others overlook, she said. We survive by understanding the whole, not just the obvious. The nobles whispered angrily, some scowling, some shocked. None of them had ever dared speak to the Emperor like this, and certainly not challenge his assumptions. Lyra's quiet strength was shifting the balance in the court. Weeks passed, and Lyra continued to observe. She learned which nobles were loyal, which were greedy, and which secretly plotted. The palace itself became her map. Secret passages, hidden rooms, and quiet corridors offered opportunities to gather information and anticipate moves against her. She memorized the guards' schedules, noting patterns and weaknesses. Every detail mattered. Then, one night, disaster struck. A small group of nobles, frustrated by her growing influence, attempted to ambush her in a hidden corridor. Lyra had expected such moves. She turned a corner and found herself facing 3 of them, their claws ready, their faces twisted with anger. Without fear, she raised her hands and spoke calmly. You are wasting energy on threats that do not exist, she said. The nobles froze, confused by her calmness. She moved quickly, sidestepping their attacks, using their momentum against them. One by one, she disarmed them, using clever techniques she had observed in human training exercises. They were strong but predictable. Humans thrived on unpredictability. Breathing lightly, Lyra left them pinned and shouted toward the palace guards. The guards arrived quickly, capturing the scheming nobles. Word of her bravery spread immediately. The Emperor, hearing the tale, smiled. He had begun to understand something he had never known. Humans could think, adapt, and act in ways his court had never seen. In the days that followed, the Emperor summoned Lyra more frequently. He asked for her advice on trade, diplomacy, and military strategy. Her words were measured, always practical, always clever. She began shaping minor decisions, subtly guiding the empire in ways that others could not predict. One morning, the emperor called her to his private chamber. "You have done more than survive here," he said, eyes steady. "You have observed, learned, and acted. Few creatures in this galaxy could do what you have. Tell me, why do you care for an empire that sees your kind as nothing?" Lyra met his gaze. "I do not serve the empire because it is grand or because it fears humans. I serve it because I see potential, and I survive because I must. Humans have always survived by understanding, adapting, and acting when others cannot." The emperor leaned forward, studying her expression. There was respect in his eyes now, mixed with something more complicated. Perhaps admiration. Perhaps curiosity. Whatever it was, it made the court seem smaller, the palace less intimidating. One human had earned a place in the heart of the empire, but Lyra knew the work had only begun. She was no longer merely surviving, she was influencing. And influence brought attention, both good and bad. Some nobles grew jealous, some plotted, and some began to watch her with wary eyes. Each day was a test, and each test strengthened her resolve. Then came the rebellion on the distant colony. Lyra suggested a new approach: send a small, disciplined force to protect key leaders and infrastructure, while negotiating with local factions to avoid unnecessary bloodshed. The nobles scoffed, but the emperor listened. The plan worked. The rebellion was quelled with minimal loss of life. The humans on the colony cheered secretly, knowing that one human's advice had saved their people. The emperor turned to Lyra privately after the success. "You have done what no advisor could. You see the threads before they are tangled. Humans, perhaps you are more than I believed." Lyra smiled faintly. She had not yet taken her chains off, but she had begun to wear them lightly. The court still saw her as a slave, but the emperor saw her differently. That was enough. Influence grew quietly, like roots beneath the soil, strong enough to change the forest above. Even at night, in the quiet of her small chamber, Lyra's mind worked. She planned her next moves, anticipating threats and opportunities alike. The court was full of dangers, but humans thrived in danger. Humans thrived in challenge, and this human, Lyra, had already proven she could survive, adapt, and even shape the heart of an empire. Her chains were still real, but they were beginning to feel like threads she could manipulate. One day, she thought, she would not only survive, she would rise. And the emperor and the galaxy would see that humans were not weak. Humans were clever, brave, and unstoppable when they chose to act. The palace halls were brighter now, yet tension lingered in the air. Lyra had survived ambushes, outwitted ambitious nobles, and guided the emperor through political and military crises. She was no longer just a servant or an advisor. The emperor's trust in her had grown so strong that even the court whispered about the human who had changed the balance of power. Today, the emperor summoned a council of all nobles. The purpose was clear: to announce reforms and new policies. Lyra knew that this moment could define her place in the empire. She prepared carefully, her mind sharp, her strategy precise. The nobles entered, their expressions skeptical, some bristling with anger. They had not forgiven her for foiling the coup or for shaping the emperor's decisions. But Lyra stood confidently beside him, her posture calm and firm. She had already earned his trust, and that trust was stronger than fear. The emperor spoke, first, his voice carrying through the chamber. "The empire has changed. Our colonies deserve fairness, our people deserve guidance, and our leaders must act wisely. Effective leadership comes not from fear alone, but from understanding and justice." Murmurs filled the room. Lyra watched carefully. She had prepared for resistance. Using subtle gestures and well-timed words, she reinforced the emperor's statements. Those who embrace wisdom will thrive. Those who resist only delay progress. But even they will be given the chance to follow the empire into a stronger future. The nobles shifted uncomfortably. They had never seen a human speak with such calm authority in a council chamber full of powerful aliens. Her presence alone commanded attention, yet her words were carefully measured to avoid direct offense. Influence was subtle, not brash, as the council ended, whispers turned to discussions. Some nobles plotted quietly, unwilling to accept the reforms, but Lyra had anticipated them. She had cultivated alliances with loyalists and respected leaders, human and alien alike. Her strategy was meticulous. Show competence, inspire respect, and neutralize opposition before it could act. That evening, in the Emperor's private chambers, he spoke quietly, eyes thoughtful. The council saw your influence today. You have done more than I expected, Lyra. You are no longer just a human among us. You are my partner in guiding the Empire. Lyra's heart beat slightly faster. I serve not for reward, my Emperor. I serve because I understand the value of careful guidance. Humans survive and thrive by observing, learning, and acting wisely. And I see the potential of this empire, its people, its strengths, and its future. The Emperor nodded. You have earned more than respect. You have earned my trust and my confidence. The Empire will recognize your place soon. Days turned into weeks, and Lyra's influence grew more visible. The reforms she had suggested were implemented, gradually changing the Empire's culture. Colonies received fair treatment, trade agreements were improved, and noble privileges were tempered with responsibility. Humans across the Empire began to gain respect and recognition for their contributions. But power always brings challenges. Some nobles continued plotting against the Emperor and Lyra, seeking to exploit the past chaos for their gain. Lyra, however, anticipated each move. She studied communications, observed behavior, and acted before threats could materialize. Her strategies were not about brute force, they were about foresight, clever planning, and calculated action. One day, an ambitious noble attempted to incite rebellion in a border system. Lyra acted quickly, sending trusted envoys to negotiate while coordinating a small fleet to ensure protection. Her plan prevented bloodshed, and the rebellion collapsed quietly. The Emperor praised her ingenuity. You saved lives and preserved the Empire's strength. Your mind is a weapon no army can match. With each success, the Emperor grew more open in his admiration. One afternoon, as they walked through the palace gardens, he spoke softly. Your presence changes everything, Lyra. You guide, you protect, and you shape the future. I trust you more than anyone else in this galaxy. Lyra bowed slightly, choosing her words with care. Trust is earned, my Emperor. Humans survive by observing, acting, and understanding. I wish only to serve wisely and help the Empire grow stronger. The Emperor studied her quietly. Then, in a gesture that shocked the court later, he publicly declared her as his mate, his partner in thought, action, and guidance. The court gasped. Some were outraged, some were awed. But no one could deny the truth. Lyra had earned her place beside the Emperor. She was no longer a slave. She was an equal. The announcement changed the dynamics of the palace. Nobles who had plotted against her grew cautious, realizing that one human had risen beyond expectation. Allies who had doubted the Emperor's judgment now watched carefully, respecting Lyra's insight and wisdom. The Empire was slowly shifting, not through fear, but through cleverness, strategy, and human influence. In private, the Emperor spoke again. The Empire's future is safer with you at my side. Together we can guide it wisely, and the galaxy will see the strength of humans firsthand. Lyra smiled faintly. Her chains had been removed, yet her responsibility had grown. Humans were underestimated, but she had proven that intelligence, courage, and patience could change even the mightiest empire. Step by step, she had risen from a captive to a mate, guiding a ruler and shaping a galaxy. That night, as she looked out over the palace terraces, Lyra reflected on her journey. She had survived. She had adapted. She had influenced. And now, she was ready for the final stage, ensuring that the Empire and the galaxy recognized the value and strength of humans. Her rise was not just personal. It was a demonstration. Humans were clever, brave, and capable of guiding entire worlds. The Emperor had seen it. The court had seen it. And soon, the galaxy would see it as well. Lyra turned back toward the palace, calm and determined. The Empire was hers to help shape, the Emperor's trust was hers to honor, and the humans, who had been underestimated for centuries now, had a champion in the heart of the galaxy. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a leader, a strategist, and a mate, and the galaxy would remember her name. The Empire had changed. The court buzzed with whispers, but this time the tone was different. Respect replaced fear, and caution blended with admiration. Lyra had transformed from a captive human to the Emperor's mate, a trusted guide whose words and actions shaped the Empire. Her influence was visible in every corner, from the colonies that had once been ignored to the nobles who now thought twice before plotting against her. Even so, challenges remained. Beyond the Empire's borders, a rival alien faction had taken notice of the recent changes. They saw weakness in what they assumed was a human-guided empire and plotted to strike. The Emperor received word of an approaching fleet, far larger than any his defenses had yet faced. Panic could have spread among the nobles, but Lyra remained calm. Humans thrived in danger. They thrived when others hesitated, and Lyra had prepared for this moment. She met with the Emperor in the war room, a chamber filled with glowing star maps and tactical displays. "The enemy believes the Empire is divided," she said. "They underestimate our strength and strategy. We will use that against them." The Emperor nodded, trust clear in his eyes. "Guide me, Lyra. Show me what humans can do." Lyra's plan was simple in concept but brilliant in execution. Instead of confronting the enemy fleet head-on, she suggested splitting their forces into smaller, faster units that could outmaneuver and outsmart the attackers. Colonies were reinforced strategically, supply routes were protected, and decoy fleets were positioned to confuse the enemy. Every move was calculated, every action deliberate. The nobles were skeptical. Some whispered that humans could never truly understand large-scale military strategy, but the Emperor's confidence in Lyra silenced them. "We follow her guidance," he commanded. When the enemy fleet arrived, Lyra's strategy unfolded perfectly. Decoy ships drew the attackers into traps, while smaller, agile units struck critical points with precision. The rival fleet, confident and arrogant, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. Their attacks were frustrated, their forces scattered, and their morale broken. Lyra watched from the command balcony, calm and focused, as humans and aliens alike executed the plan flawlessly. The Emperor moved beside her, his respect for her growing with every maneuver. "You have saved countless lives today," he said quietly. Lyra's lips curved into a faint smile. "We saved the Empire. Humans survive by thinking ahead, acting carefully, and adapting quickly. The same rules apply in strategy." By the end of the battle, the enemy fleet was defeated. Their ships either destroyed or retreating, their forces demoralized. The Empire had survived, stronger than ever, and humans across its systems had seen the results of clever thinking, courage, and planning. The Emperor summoned a council meeting after the victory. Lyra stood beside him, no longer hidden in shadows or chains. She had earned her place, not only through loyalty and courage, but through intellect and foresight. This victory, the Emperor declared, is not mine alone. It is the result of careful planning, courage, and the guidance of someone extraordinary. A human who has proven that intelligence and determination can rival any weapon. The court fell silent, eyes wide. Even those who had once plotted against Lyra now understood her importance. She had not only protected the Empire, but also shown that humans could contribute more than the aliens had ever imagined. Later, in private, the Emperor spoke to Lyra quietly. "You have changed everything. You guided me, saved the Empire, and proved humans' worth. I could not have done this without you." Lyra bowed slightly. "Humans survive by observing, learning, and acting wisely. You trusted me. And together we achieved this. The Empire is stronger now because we worked as one." The Emperor's expression softened. "You are more than a guide. You are my mate, my partner, and my equal. Together, we shape the Empire and the future of the galaxy." For Lyra, the moment was profound. She had risen from the lowest position, a captive human slave, to the heart of power, influencing not only the Emperor, but the entire Empire. The galaxy would never underestimate humans again. Their cleverness, courage, and resilience had been proven beyond doubt. In the weeks that followed, reforms continued across the Empire. Colonies gained autonomy and respect, trade flourished, and nobles who once ruled through fear now acted responsibly. Lyra's strategies and insights guided the Emperor in making fair, just, and effective decisions. Humans were no longer invisible or underestimated. They were essential. At night, Lyra often stood on the palace terrace, looking out over the shining towers and distant stars. She thought of her journey, from chains to strategy, from fear to trust, from survival to influence. The galaxy had changed, not through brute force alone, but through courage, intelligence, and human ingenuity. The Emperor joined her quietly, placing a hand on her shoulder. "The Empire is united," he said softly, "and you are at the center of it, guiding us." Lyra nodded. "We are united," she replied. "Humans, aliens, leaders, and people alike. We survived the chaos and became stronger. The galaxy has seen what humans are capable of, and it will remember." Together, they watched the stars, the future of the Empire shining bright before them. The throne was no longer a symbol of fear alone. It was a symbol of wisdom, strategy, and unity. And at the heart of it all stood a human who had once been a slave, now the mate of the Emperor, the architect of change, and a living proof that humans could shape the destiny of worlds. The Empire would never forget her name. Lyra had shown that humans were clever, brave, and unstoppable when they chose to act. Her journey had begun with survival, but it ended with leadership, respect, and the triumph of human spirit. The galaxy had witnessed the rise of a human from the shadows, and it would never underestimate her kind again.